say welcome. I'm Matt Hinckus. I'm the Vice President of Grants and Initiatives at the iWest Foundation. We have a lot of foundation staff, both from iWest Foundation and our partner Pottawattamie County Community Foundation, who are on this webinar with us. And so one of the things that we do in our normal grants workshop when we're able to be in person, that we're hoping to recreate a little bit here, is to do a round of introductions. And we're not asking you to unmute and introduce yourself, but what we are asking is if you would please, in the chat box, indicate who you are, what organization you're with, and where are you joining us from, just geographically, because it's always interesting to see which cities, counties, communities people are joining us from. I will take a second to introduce the staff that I know is on the call from our two foundations, and starting with Pottawattamie County Community Foundation, we have the CEO, Donna Dostal, who's on the call, and we have Kelly Dix, who I believe is their Chief Operating Officer. Is that roughly what it is?
Vice President of Operations, yeah.
Yes, thank you. And then on our side, on the iWest Foundation side, in the room with me, which you can see me on two screens because I'm at the far end of the table, where Pete Tulipana, our CEO, is, and our tech host is Melina Rousseau. If you want to play a fun game of Where's Waldo and look at the gallery of faces, you'll find Deb DeBout, who's our program director, and you'll see Tim Galligan, one of our program officers, and you'll see a Pam Bierce somewhere. I don't think she's on video though, where she is our grants assistant. And so we're happy to have all of them joining us. And I see that we have a lot of people coming through on the chat who are joining with us. And I'm going to see if I can pull it up here on my screen. I see Ken Jewell and Scott Caldwell, Amy Weindell, Kim Smith. There's a lot of Stacy Goodman. Thank you everyone for taking the time to join us today. The focus of this conversation is going to be a very specific subset of our COVID-19 fund. What we're looking to do today is our COVID-19 fund has three areas that we fund in, and one of them is nonprofit sustainability. It's continuity of nonprofit operations in the time that we're dealing with right now with the COVID infection. And this is something that we have had past phases on, and it's something that required, I think, us to develop a bit of a philosophy about and a strategy for how we're addressing it. So we're going to go through that with you all today and try to shed some light on how that works and what you can expect from us if you do apply for this support. During the workshop, we're going to be recording it, and we're going to be starting, we already started the recording, which is great. So just so you know, whatever you say can and will be used against you. Additionally, we are going to be fielding questions from you. And just to try to manage the questions, what we hope to do is have you submit the questions through the group chat. And you can see on the screen here that I'm sharing that what we're asking you to do is just start with a Q and then a colon so that we can kind of identify it in the chat listing. So the example we have is, what is your favorite color? And of course, my favorite color is Southwest Iowa COVID-19 Response Fund branded green. And I hope you all enjoy it as much as I do. Here's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to ask Pete Tulipana to give us a quick overview of the fund. And then we're going to talk about how we're going to approach this from kind of a due diligence perspective at the two foundations. We're combining our approach. It's been a great partnership so far. And we're going to ask, as part of that, Donna Dostal to go over that philosophy piece. That's really what overlays the entire process that we do. And it helps you to understand, because we don't necessarily have one specific set of questions that will answer everything we need to know. And so your understanding of that philosophy piece that Donna's going to cover is really going to help you to navigate our process quickly and effectively. We'll give some information on how to apply if you're not familiar with it already, and then we'll do answers to any questions that you have along the way. I see we have one question already, which is wonderful. The question is, could we receive copies of the visuals used during the meeting, PowerPoint slides, etc.? I'm happy to tell you it's already available. It's on the iWest Foundation website, and it will be also on the Pottawattamie County Community Foundation website. It's for at least the iWest Foundation website, located right underneath the link to download the application. So you can already access that. If you want to pull it down and take notes on it right now, you're welcome to. So I think most of you are familiar with both the iWest Foundation and Pottawattamie County Community Foundation, but I did want to take this chance to, at least if you're only familiar with one of us, to give you the opportunity to learn a little bit more about the other. At the iWest Foundation, our vision is a community where families choose to live and businesses choose to locate because of the quality of life and the standard of living. And as of 2020, we have now invested $500 million to nonprofit organizations and government entities, enhancing the quality of lives of thousands of our area citizens in our communities. And we're very excited about that mark that we hit late last year or mid last year. So it's been a great kind of time of celebration leading into COVID, which has been less of a time of celebration. At the Pottawattamie County Community Foundation, they're a nationally accredited community foundation serving thousands of people who share a common interest, which is improving the quality of life in Pottawattamie County in southwest Iowa. Their mission is that the Pottawattamie County Community Foundation is a partnership of rural and urban citizens dedicated to improving the lives of all residents by supporting and stimulating donor-driven philanthropy. And as you can imagine, part of that is that individuals, families, businesses, and organizations create lasting impact through their permanent charitable funds they create through the Community Foundation. And so they are an effective catalyst to connect the causes that people are passionate about with their giving, and that they can feel confident and secure knowing that their funds are working hard to create the most impact in our community. I'm going to turn it over to Pete Tulipana, and he's going to give us an overview of the COVID-19 Relief Fund that was set up by our two organizations.
Good morning, everybody. For those of you that I haven't seen recently, you can see that I've grown a COVID beard over the last couple of months, which has been my enjoyable part of this isolation. I tell my wife every day I'm getting ready to cut it off, so we'll see how long it lasts. I wanted to start by talking a little bit about the partnership that we have with Pottawattamie County Community Foundation. It's very important to me, and just to give a little context for that, the iOS Foundation actually was the incubator for the Pottawattamie Community Foundation, and I think we've been working together with them from a funding perspective for at least 10 years, if I recall correctly. So we're very, very pleased to have Donna Dossel there leading that organization today. And when we talked about doing a COVID fund, we sought out Donna and the Pottawattamie Community Foundation primarily because we wanted to approach this not just as an iOS Foundation initiative, but as a community initiative to help to respond to the issues that all of us are experiencing because of COVID. And what Pottawattamie County Community Foundation brings to the table that's very important is a vehicle for individuals and corporations to make donations along with their own resources that they've put into this. And so we've been able to, as a result of that, go out together. Donna and I and others have been out asking for support from other folks to help support this fund. And I think on your screen right now, you can see a list of some of the folks that have been participating in our COVID fund here. You'll see some Omaha foundations, which has been one of my priorities over the time that I've been a part of the foundation here, is to really invite other philanthropists to join us and to leverage the resources that we have. And so Donna has the vehicle to do that at the Pottawattamie County Community Foundation. In addition to hosting those funds when they come in, she also has been able to generate some individual donations. So it's a broad coalition of individuals who've been a part of creating this fund, and the decisions about how we are investing the funds have been joint decisions made between the foundation, the iOS Foundation, and the Pottawattamie County Community Foundation. And during our, I want to say isolation, but as we've been out of the office, Donna and Matt and I have had twice weekly meetings because we wanted to really be attentive to that process and make sure that we were responding appropriately and as quickly as we could. And I think it worked very well. So we created this combined approach, and I think what that allowed us to do is to have one application. So you're not applying, you don't have to apply separately to the iOS Foundation or the Pottawattamie County Community Foundation. We had, as I mentioned, a rolling review of all the new applications on a regular basis. We worked very hard not to get ahead of ourselves on that and not to fund things that federal or state or other dollars could fund, because even though our board has been generous and community donors have been generous, even though we've been successful at putting together this coalition, we know the need is great and it's not going away soon. So we've been working technologically to leverage this, and we've also learned a lot. We've been using Trello, which is a software that we hadn't used here, but we found it to be really, really successful in managing our process. And I think our grants team will continue to use it in some regards. So as Matt sort of started, the areas of focus, we started, and the only applications that we were looking at were support to vulnerable populations. And that in our minds, that meant we wanted to make sure people had food to eat, that we were attentive to our most vulnerable populations, and that in our minds were our shelters, New Visions and Micah House and any other shelters. We wanted to make sure that we were being responsive if there was a need, and making sure that they had the resources they needed to handle. I guess, I don't know if Bob and James are on here, but I've been really impressed that they've been able to keep the incidences very low in both of those shelters, and so we haven't had huge issues there. And then we partnered with the with Chris LaFurla at the foundation, Council of Schools Foundation, because one of our issues we wanted to make sure that we were attentive to was day childcare for essential workers. And so the Schools Foundation has done that, and most of the funding of that has come from our fund and or from outside foundations. So that is going to continue at least through the end of July, as Chris is working on with his team sort of what might need to happen in terms of childcare as we move into the school year, because I guess a lot of that depends on what decision the school districts make in terms of their daily attendance or not. So the first one was the support to vulnerable populations. We were very attentive to expansion of public health infrastructure. It turned out that we didn't have to invest a lot of resources in that expansion of the public health infrastructure, because there were plenty of state and federal dollars that came down. We've made some small investments with our partners at the city and the county, but now we're moving to continuity of operations for nonprofit communities and opening that window, which is the purpose for this workshop. Our original plan when we talked to our partners, nonprofit organizations, was tell us what you need if you need something to get through July, and we'll look at July through the rest of the year once we get past this initial first stage. And so that's what we're going to be opening up now, is attention to that. And I think that's it, unless you have any specific questions of me at this point in time. You're welcome to. I guess I'll pass it back.
Okay, and we'll keep monitoring the chat box for any questions. Feel free, as I mentioned, to ask questions throughout. Melina, if I don't catch it, will nudge me and we'll make sure that we address it. I'm going to just address eligibility quickly, because I know that's something that is on everyone's mind frequently for these. And then we're going to pass it over to Donna, who will unmute herself in just a second. And so eligibility, this is a blend, and I think it's important to understand that we're looking at the policies of two foundations because of this. The first is that for either foundation, you need to have a physical facility in Southwest Iowa. That's something that for nonprofit operating funds, especially the Iowa West Foundation, has been a requirement. But then you have to be eligible for at least one of the foundations in order to proceed. And I think it's important that you know where to find that information. At the bottom of the screen, you'll see two links, and I provided the longer links just so that you can kind of see how to navigate to it, or you can, through the handouts that we provided, hopefully click on them and they should work as actual URL links. But with iOS Foundation, under our grant making section, there's information on the what we fund and the what we don't fund sections that would be helpful. But I think if I pointed you towards one place, it'd be the what we don't fund area. And then on the Pottawattamie County Community Foundation website, under nonprofits, there is a grant opportunity section that has information on their eligibility. One of the questions we have received ahead of this, and that we'll try to integrate those answers along the way, is that can you apply if you've already received funding from the COVID-19 fund? The answer is yes, with an asterisk on it. And that asterisk is that you have to have turned in the report that you from the past grant and completed it before you apply again. But also we are not likely to fund, of course, overlapping things. So you want to make sure that if you receive nonprofit continuity support in that first phase that Pete talked about, that's why we're kind of creating a distinct separation, that it's to allow people to look forward now and to apply during the second phase. If you haven't completed the funding and the use of the funds from the first phase, though, you would want to do that before you reapply. And again, if you have questions about that along the way, you're welcome to ask in the chat box, or you can save them for the end and we'll be happy to address them. But I know that was one question that we received during this. Now, Donna Dostal is going to take over for a second, and she's going to talk a bit about how we're approaching this philosophically for the second phase, and I will let her take the lead.
Thank you very much, Matt, and welcome everyone. It's lovely to see everybody's faces today. To sort of build on what Pete Tulipanis spoke about, our philosophy behind the COVID-19 response has, to this point, has really been to be very responsive to the needs of our nonprofit partners, and to not be duplicative. That was something that was very important to us. It became apparent very quickly that there was going to be a lot of federal money that was available to organizations, and we wanted to make sure that we weren't overlapping or getting ahead of ourselves. And we are going to continue to operate in that manner. We have to make sure that we're not overlapping, we're not stepping in where we really don't need to be because the federal government is helping, right? However, we really want to make sure that we're focusing on what you need to kind of create a little breathing room for your organizations. We know it's going to be difficult. So, our first focus was definitely making sure that you were able to have that nonprofit continuity of service and fill gaps where you were kind of needing to make sure that things weren't, like the dam wasn't going to burst. From now, though, right now our focus is between March and June, making sure that we have that continuity of service, and we've worked with a lot of you to make sure that you have the money that you need to make yourselves whole, whatever PPP wasn't able to fill the gaps for you. I know that there's been a little bit of even more breathing room. Things are evolving very quickly, and the forgiveness of some of those loans has been relaxed. And some of those things, some of those deadlines are a little bit different. So that's making it a little bit easier for you guys. However, we know it's going to be very difficult to forecast for what's happening after July, towards the end of the year, and even into 2021. As we get information, we'll continue to keep you posted. We try and stay as informed and connected to, we have communication and contacts through the Iowa Council of Foundations that's constantly feeding us information about what's happening in Washington, D.C. and at the state level. So as we get new information, we'll continue to pass that along to you. As you know, we've been able to provide those resources along the road, and we're going to continue to do that. But we also request that if you hear anything, or if you're seeing roadblocks that you're running into, that you relate that to us so that we can figure out how to overcome those roadblocks or understand better what you're seeing at the front lines, because we only see what the regulations and what we see coming down the pipe. You guys are at the front lines, so as you are experiencing the things that you need to make sure that you're being able to operate day to day as you're experiencing those things, we want to be able to hear from you and hear what's working and what's not, so that we can help you navigate through that and problem solve around that. One of the things as we're moving forward, probably the most important philosophy that we have around the COVID-19 response as we're moving forward into this recovery and continuity of service phase is making sure that our organizations that we work with, our nonprofit partners, have a plan, and that they're working that plan, and that you're keeping us informed as to what that plan looks like. We know it's going to be very difficult with you having to cancel events. You're not sure where your where your donor pipeline is coming from. Contracts may be suspended or looking differently going forward. So we need to know where that factors into your plan, and ask you to be transparent with us so that we can help you to problem solve for that as well. We know that planning for 2021 is going to be really difficult, but we want to make sure that you're in that process, that you provide us with a plan. We understand that, and those are things that we're going to be looking at. When you come to us and you ask us to help kind of create some of that breathing room for you, because quite honestly, we're going to be honest, there's just not going to be enough money to make everyone whole. The need is great. It continues to rise. This is quite a movable feast right now, unfortunately. We have wonderful, generous partners. However, that money goes pretty quickly. And so we're going to be honest, we're not going to be able to make everyone whole. However, what we really want to do is help create some breathing room for you so that you can plan, so that you can feel that you have some foundation there, that you can move forward, and then kind of regroup and make sure that your alternative funding sources are coming in a way that can kind of fill those gaps. And so we want to be able to help you with that, and making sure that you have a really strong plan on how you're going to do that, and following that plan is going to be imperative to be able to communicate that back and forth with us. for organizations that receive awards, we're going to be able to create check-ins with you so we can see how things are going down the road for you. How are you doing on implementing your plan? We want to see that plan, and then we'll check in with you to see how things are going. We want you to be honest with us and say, hey, this is what we're experiencing. It's important that we as a community work together on this so that we can go back to additional funding sources and say, hey, we have a significant need here in Southwest Iowa. How can you help us with that? We have well-documented plans, and it's just we're really falling short. So we need to have that additional support. So making sure that you're telling us your story and telling us in a timely fashion before it gets too far down the road and you feel like you've hit a dead end is going to be really important. What things are changing? What are changing for you? How are things changing down the road? We want to make sure that we hear that. What is happening that seems to be better, or that are solutions that have come down the road that you didn't expect. And if there's another organization that might be able to benefit from what you're learning, we're going to be able to share that out and help you tell your story. And so it will be very important that this is a collaborative experience for everyone. Just like Pete said, between the Iowa West Foundation, the Pottawattamie County Community Foundation, and all of our funders that have come together and want to make sure that we're providing solutions for our community, we meet regularly. We talk about it. We talk about your successes. We talk about your challenges. And so making sure that you're talking with us about that is going to help us understand better what the needs are of the community and the folks that are really doing the work to make sure our community stays whole and stays vibrant. And then how have you adapted to these new situations? What are you doing from a fundraising perspective? How are you changing the game? Just recently we held a webinar that we spoke with the folks at Micah House they were one of the first ones to have to really shift and adapt and do some real-time online event fundraising. They did some great things. How are you adapting to this new situation where for the next year or so, we're really going to have to shift and change? If you're doing things that are working, we want to hear about that and celebrate your success. We want to help celebrate that success as well. So from a philosophical perspective, that's what we're really trying to create, is some breathing room for you all. Certainly not going to be able to, unfortunately, write blank checks. That's not really what we're here for. We're here to be supportive, create that breathing room, help you leverage the resources that are out there, because there are a lot of resources. So it's really incumbent upon you to understand where all of your resources can come from and how we can work together to make this all work over the next 6, 8, 12, 15 months as we recover from this. So if you have any questions for Pete or me, and you can always reach out to either one of us. We're very, very willing and able to talk with you whenever you need to. So Matt, I'm gonna turn it over to you now. If there's anything else you need from me, you let me know.
Great, thank you, Donna. So Donna, I think, highlighted a couple of points that were important. And one of the things that both Pete and Donna highlighted that I want to just start off with is we've been working hard at the two foundations to try to grow the fund as much as possible. But we know that the extent of this crisis and the impact it's having on our partners through all the three areas that we're funding in is going to exceed what our ultimate ability is to fund. And so that's why we thought it's really important that we have this conversation today with you, provide you with that philosophy that Donna talked about, but also go into some of what can you expect when you apply? What are the types of questions that we're going to ask so that you can get a sense of what you can do to be successful in applying to this fund for your dollars and support. Because the number one thing that's going to drive this to some extent is how are you adapting? How are you taking responsibility for generating the resources that you need to continue to have the impact that it's important that your mission requires? And so I'm going to switch now to that next step. And we started this conversation a little bit. I've mentioned it, and I think Pete and Donna have each mentioned it, that this is a fluid environment that we're in. And so it's not a situation that lends itself directly and easily to having a stock set of questions that if you could check the boxes, you're in a strong footing, which is why we thought it was so important to have Donna talk through that philosophy piece with us. So you can start to understand what's the lens that we're looking at this through and how are we approaching the work that we're doing with you. And I think generally, if we're trying to give you a sense of what are the types of things you should expect from us and that you can be proactive about communicating to us, we want to understand how you're adapting to COVID-19 in 3 areas: operations, programming, and finances. And so I'm going to walk through each one of those areas in a little bit of detail and try to get as specific as we can. But I do want to just reiterate for the 3rd time that this is a conversation we're expecting to have with you, and we want to get a good understanding of where you are and what the situation is with your organization, so that we can have the conversation internally that we do to identify at what level we're able to provide some support. So in terms of operations, we know that this is impacting operations in a way that's changing and evolving over time. And so one of the questions is, we asked this in the first phase too, for those of you who are involved with that, we want to understand what you're doing with respect to staffing. We know that there were requirements if you receive funding from the Paycheck Protection Program, the PPP that's been referenced, that would require you to bring on staff at certain levels. And we know that not only have you had to perhaps furlough staff or look at alternative staffing arrangements, but you may have had to hire additional staff for short-term work, for additional cleaning or facility needs that you didn't have in the past. So we want to understand, what does your staffing structure look like now? How have operational changes impacted this? And how are your operational changes impacting your budget? Additional PPE uses, requiring some deep cleaning services perhaps, or because you're not operating the facilities quite as much, maybe there's some savings involved in some ways that by canceling some of the programs you've had some savings that you can apply towards your other uses. And then we recognize this won't necessarily be static over the course of July through December. So what are your expectations? How do you think this is going to evolve during the course of that time? And what are you going to be doing to make sure that you're kind of looking at this with a critical eye along the way? What's your criteria for addressing that? From a programmatic perspective, I think our expectation is that we're all trying, even with the challenges that we're facing, to still pursue our missions and to provide the services, especially the critical ones that are needed in the community. So how are you adapting through the remainder of 2020? Are there phases to that? Is it kind of like reopening a business that you might have an early idea of what's going to happen and you're hoping to get to a more expansive approach later in the year? And how would you go about making that decision as well? And you can see why this lends itself hopefully to a bit of a conversation that we would want to really get a good understanding of just your thinking and thought process around this. What have you had to stop doing as a result of COVID-19? We talked about things you might have had to start doing on the other slide, but what have you not been able to continue, and how are you helping to make sure that what's not being done is not impacting people negatively? And then this is kind of similar to what I've already said, but what is your process to continue to monitor and update your plan? From the financial perspective, reserves are a big question that we want to understand. And what we want to understand is, if you were to end up in a situation where you had no new revenue coming in for a period of time, what resources do you have available to continue your operations, and how long? How many months could you continue your operations? The best practice that we see in philanthropy and in nonprofit management is having 6 months of reserves. And when I say that, I'm sure there's a lot of facial expressions that are going to happen on the other side of this video, because I know a lot of our partners would be thrilled and do a backflip if they had 6 months of reserves in place. And that's more of an aspirational target that a lot of us are working towards over time. It's worth saying that this COVID is a great example of why that best practice exists. We know that it's going to be a longer than a 6-month issue, but it gives you the breathing room to help to reorganize some of your thinking and to reforecast and to prepare to plan differently. It's a different situation, as I think Donna had started to mention, when we're looking at 2021, because you have the opportunity to plan the whole year based on what the current understanding of COVID-19 is. But none of us had that luxury when 2020 started. And a lot of what we're going through right now, we're having to adapt and to shift what our focus is as things are evolving. So that's why our focus is really looking at the end of the calendar year, July through December, to try to give you that space that Donna was talking about, that breathing room. We can't solve the whole problem most likely, but we can help to give you that space to be able to reforecast and adapt some of your fundraising and some of your other giving, revenue sources, perhaps earned income if you can, then to be able to respond by the end of the year effectively to what your organizational needs are. So what does this look like? What we're going to need, and we tried to integrate this into the application there. If you've seen the application in the past, there's an updated version that's now on our websites. And it incorporates getting some narrative for discussing how you're making those adaptations we talked about. We would like to see, what was your original plan for 2020 in terms of your budget? And how have you reforecast that? We want to understand your 2020 budget and the actuals to date, and then to look moving forward, what are your changing expectations around that? And it's helpful if you could provide us with some notes explaining the major things that are shifting or moving. And we always are asked when we're doing these types of grants workshops for samples. And so here on the screen, you'll see one potential way that you could organize those notes, really saying, okay, so we had planned that we were going to have our annual fundraising gala in April of 2020. Because of COVID, we didn't think we could move forward with it, so we delayed it till the fall. We currently have a plan for October. But in the meantime, we did reach out to the sponsors that we had and requested whether they would shift from a sponsorship to just a donation of what their normal sponsorship would be. We're also moving the event online, and we're trying to adapt to that. And while our original fundraising goals, we expected to raise $80,000 for that, we don't think we're going to raise as much moving online, so we're expecting now to earn $65,000 from it. We recognize there's probably more art than science in that, especially for organizations that are moving on to an online fundraising platform for the first time. But we do want to know what your expectations are and what your goal is. And then in the notes that, things that might be eliminated and other savings that are happening. It could be that, and we've had in the webinar that was referenced by Donna, an example where maybe we didn't have the overall fundraising from an organization that they were hoping for, but they also eliminated a lot of costs by moving an event from an in-person to an online platform, but through events and catering costs. So it could be that the net dollars coming into the organization weren't as hit hard as they could have been if we were looking at just the gross revenue coming in. So I hope this is at least a helpful example. And if people have questions and you're not sure how to provide the information, then you can always reach out to staff. This is something that we repeat a lot during our grants workshops, and I think Donna has said it and Pete has said it as well, that if you have questions, we don't want you to just struggle and to tread water. We'd rather you reach out to us so we can help guide you and you can give us what we're looking for rather than that you kind of throw something, a dart, and hope it hits the target. We know that from the iOS Foundation perspective, this is something we've been very intentional about doing because we do grantee perception reports on a regular basis, and we've learned over time that us providing a little bit of time up front provides a lot of relief for you all in the application process, and we're happy to dedicate that time. And I know PCCF has also expressed their happiness to do the same. So for those who haven't applied, for those who want to know what the process is, you can find the application on the front page of both iOS Foundation and Pottawattamie County Community Foundation's websites. And you'll see in it is a list of the questions and some of the documents that we've talked about today, so that even if you weren't as part of this webinar, you should still have a good inkling of what we're looking for. And then it's submitted to Southwest Iowa COVID Response, SWI COVID Response, one word, @gmail.com. We've created a separate email account to host this because we wanted to recognize that this is really creating a fund that's between our organizations, not necessarily within each of our organizations separately. And that is monitored regularly. These are reviewed on a rolling basis, so there's no deadline to apply. There's no specific time frame that we'll get back to you either, but we do endeavor to get back to you as swiftly as we can, and you should expect that within the first few days, you'll receive outreach from one of our staff people in order to follow up and to let you know we received the application and to follow up with any additional conversation and questions that we're going to have. This is a screenshot of just where it is on the iOS Foundation front page. It's that orange box that the big green arrow is pointing towards, and that is my favorite branded color. So look for the big green arrow. And then on the Pottawattamie County Community Foundation website, you'll see a couple of those arrows, but look for the big one. Look for the giant one that's on the left, and that is right here where the application is, and you can access it that way. Additional resources, Donna mentioned that we're trying to identify and cultivate a resource page on each of our websites that can be helpful to you, so you're aware of what resources we've identified and we've seen. Donna mentioned that our expectation is that every organization is trying to identify and maximize the use of all the available resources, especially state and federal resources. There's a lot of money that's been made available through different avenues, and it's hard to keep track of it. So it requires a lot of attention from all of us to make sure that we're not losing out on money that could be coming into our collective organizations and community because we're not paying attention to what is available. So we're doing our best to keep you apprised of what we're seeing. Donna mentioned that we have a couple ways that we receive this information, but you can find it on either our websites. The Pot County Community Foundation, I'm going to go back for a second because it is on there. Actually, I think it's also forward, but it is on below, so I'm going to move forward instead. iOS Foundation here, this is what it looks like. And then you'll see a similar graphic on the Pot County Community Foundation website here. That's an indication of how we're all trying to stay together and in kind of a similar lockstep on that, because we don't want to get different types of resources out there that could end up being confusing. That's the content that we wanted to share with you today. And now I'm going to open it up and pause for a second. I see that we're getting some questions coming through, which is great. So if you joined us a little bit after the beginning, we're asking people to submit any questions you have in the comment box. And you'll see that the format that we're doing, or in the chat box, and the format that we're using is just put Q in front of it so we can identify what it is. We have a question that I see, and for the record, anytime I'm looking up at the large screen in front of where I can see the chat box. So sorry if I'm not looking at you, but should we plan on sending the report to both IWF and PCCF? If it's a report for a active grant that you're concluding, then look at the email that we sent as the agreement, and it will indicate points of contact. Funding may have come from one or both organizations, and based on that, you'll receive a point of contact. Report should be sent to the points of contact that are listed in the agreement. That could be one or two people, again, probably either Deb DeBout at our office or Kelly Dix at Pottawattamie County Community Foundation. If you are submitting an application, you submit it simply through that one email address, the Gmail address that we showed you before, which I'll pop back to, and that will get to both organizations for our review processes. I see there's another question. Will the new submission grant go to both? Yes, it will. That was just probably answered while the question was being typed, but the grant applications are sent to both, are routed through that one Gmail account to both organizations. And then additionally, when there's other partners involved, we organize and coordinate reaching out to those partners for grants that may be eligible for their funding as well. And that's a process that we manage kind of internally. So we want to make it as simple as possible for our partners to be able to apply for the fund, because we'd rather you spend the time writing one really strong, complete application than that you worry about having to submit an application to multiple organizations. Any other questions that are on people's minds right now? I'll pause for just a second, and then I'll let you know that this webinar has been recorded if you didn't hear that at the beginning, and it'll be available on our websites. We have under our resource page for iOS Foundation a section for webinars, including the one that Pottawattamie County Community Foundation did. I know this is also going to be on the Pottawattamie County Community Foundation website. Again, we try to keep consistent sets of resources available to you all. And we really do appreciate you taking the time to spend with us this morning so that you can learn a little bit more about how to be successful in this process. And don't hesitate to reach out to any one of our staff people who've been on this. If we don't have an immediate answer for you, we'll get back to you with an answer. And we're trying to make sure that we're providing consistent information to everyone who applies. So thank you, everyone.